Today's video starts as a seemingly straightforward story about police trying to solve a murder. But by the time you reach the end, you'll realize that nothing in this case is what it seems. There's a shocking twist that will change everything you thought you knew. But before we dive in, if you enjoy stories about the strange, dark, and mysterious, then you're in the right place. We upload videos like this every week, so if that sounds interesting, sneak into the like button's house and replace all their family photos with pictures of the dislike button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Now, let's get into today's story. CSS Crime Story Series. The cold case that haunted a detective for 21 years. On the morning of August 30, 2001, Sergeant Alan McGregor and his partner, Officer Mark David, drove toward the Huron National Forest in northern Michigan. They were on their way to meet an unusual detective, one who McGregor believed might finally help him solve a case that had haunted him for 21 years, the disappearance of Carita Thomas. Back in 1980, Carita was last seen getting into a car with an older man. She was never seen again. Police were convinced that the man was Jimmy Nelson and that he had murdered Carita before disposing of her body in the Huron National Forest. But despite years of searching, even with the FBI's involvement, her remains were never found. That's why McGregor was hopeful when he arrived at the forest's entrance. There, waiting for him, was the so-called best cadaver dog in the world, a Doberman Pinscher mix named Eagle. His trainer, Sandra Anderson, stood proudly beside him. CSS Crime Story Series. The dog with a superpower. Sandra was famous in law enforcement circles for training Eagle to sniff out human remains. Incredibly, Eagle wasn't just good, he was considered better than police-trained cadaver dogs. Supposedly, he could even detect blood that had been scrubbed with bleach and painted over. As soon as the search began, Eagle started sniffing around the forest. Then, in a matter of minutes, he suddenly stopped at a tree and began digging. When Sandra looked closer, she saw something buried beneath the dirt, a human bone fragment. McGregor and his partner were stunned. They had spent decades searching, and now, within minutes, Eagle had found what appeared to be human remains. Over the next 2 days, Eagle continued to uncover more bones. It seemed like the mystery of Carita Thomas was finally being solved. CSS Crime Story Series. A shocking twist. Months later, the FBI completed an analysis of the bones. McGregor expected confirmation that they belonged to Carita. But when he received the call, the truth stunned him. The bones weren't Carita's. In fact, they didn't even belong to just one person. The FBI determined they were remains from 3 different individuals. For McGregor, this revelation was terrifying. Could Jimmy Nelson be a serial killer? Were there more bodies hidden in the forest? The only way to find out was to bring Eagle back for another search. CSS Crime Story Series. The Moment of Truth. On April 17, 2002, McGregor and a team of officers returned to the forest with Sandra and Eagle. This time, during the search, Eagle sniffed out yet another human bone, a knuckle bone in a dried-up stream. McGregor felt like he was on the verge of uncovering a massive case. But then, suddenly, he heard a commotion behind him. He turned to see what looked like a fight breaking out between Sandra and a crime lab technician. As officers rushed in to break it up, the horrifying truth came to light. The person responsible for planting the bones wasn't a serial killer. It wasn't even Jimmy Nelson. The real culprit was Sandra Anderson herself. CSS Crime Story Series. The truth behind the greatest cadaver dog. Sandra and Eagle had never actually discovered human remains. Instead, Sandra had been planting bones during searches. She had been sneaking human bone fragments from medical cadavers into crime scenes and secretly dropping them for Eagle to find. She had done this dozens of times across the country, fooling law enforcement agencies for years. She wasn't trying to frame anyone, she just craved the thrill of watching police solve crimes because of her supposed skills. During this search, Sandra had been caught in the act. A technician had seen her pulling a bone from her sock and dropping it on the ground. When confronted, she panicked and tried to stage an altercation to distract from what she had done. CSS Crime Story Series. Aftermath. Sandra was arrested and pleaded guilty to multiple felonies, including falsifying evidence and obstruction of justice. She was sentenced to 21 months in prison. The FBI had to re-examine 50 murder cases that she had been involved in. Fortunately, none of the convictions were overturned, as no case had relied solely on her fraudulent evidence. As for Jimmy Nelson, he was eventually convicted of Carita Thomas's murder. However, his conviction was later overturned for reasons unrelated to Sandra's deception. To this day, Carita's body has never been found. And Eagle, well, he was just a good dog caught in a bad situation. He retired, got all the treats he wanted, and passed away peacefully in 2003. Conclusion: what do you think of this case? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, we have hundreds more for you to binge. But if you're looking for the one that I personally recommend, it's this one right here, check it out. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.